do something. Hit Google and hit Charlestown and see what you see. King Pong, bless our smarty breath. Champong Nani, Sikkim Begwa. Thank you all for journeying from your home to join with us in this 4th conference of Maroon. This being our 50th year of independence. It is interesting that my uncles would tell me that the 4th of August is not our day because no one gave us freedom. We fought and took our freedom. But we will celebrate this day anyway.
I'm not a Maroon. I bet that's obvious. But through my participation in the International Maroon Conference over the last couple of years here in Charlestown, I've come to know Maroons, to count some of them among my friends. Colonel Frank, Kim Douglas, Norris, Mama G, Melvin, Charles, Solomon, Fidelia. I've come to admire them as people who persist against strong odds, who maintain allegiance to cultural traditions, who practice freedom in the face of constant pressure to forsake it. I've come to learn from them too. I've learned about these cultural traditions, the jerked pork, the ring dance, the box drum, the ambush. I've learned about a history that begins in 17th century resistance to enslavement and persists in fights over land and independence, fights for independence today.
This edition is really about how different groups of people of African descent practice African diaspora history and culture. And so I have a particular definition of diaspora as being a critical practice, and I'm interested in looking at how Maroon in particular practice this idea of diaspora, how they use tradition to inform how they organize their society and how they use it to also interact with like other parts of other parts of the Jamaican community and different people of African descent.
My presentation is called Freedom Then and Now, the Role of Informed Consent in Maroon Rights in Suriname. This time what we're seeing is that there's been a maturation in how Maroons deal with their government. In the 80s there was civil unrest because of a civil war that lasted for about 5 or 6 years in the late 80s to the early 90s. And in the 90s we saw Maroons galvanizing legal support from international NGOs to support their betterment in the interior, in the jungle interior of Suriname, where they habitate right now. So whether or not we're moving towards civil unrest, I wouldn't say that, because I think historically we see that there's a more of a legal route being taken to address issues that they're unhappy with, legal issues, governmental issues.
Three Finger Jack, as you know by now, was a heroic escape fugitive slave. At least that's the way the colonialists in the 18th century described him. But he was a freedom fighter. He believed deeply in his own autonomy. He believed deeply in his right to own his body and his right to pursue his own life without being enchained or without being owned by anybody else.
Three Finger Jack is such an ostensibly small, marginal story, but his story has crossed oceans, and it's lasted 225 years. Oceans and classes and races and ethnicities. It's so many different people tell stories about Three Finger Jacks in different ways, and so therefore it tells a great deal about the people who are telling the story. They're telling stories about themselves as they tell stories about him.
Within the context of the age of slavery, the Maroons, by dint of their very autonomy, stretched the lateral possibilities of reality and pushed the possibilities of freedom to their extreme. This was the very essence of their ideological danger to the slave power. Slave narratives from Mary Prince to Harriet Jacobs to Frederick Douglass show us that the master was first and foremost an ideologist. Indeed, one of the many malign aspects of the slave system was that it tried to make Africans believe that they were completely dependent on an invincible master.
Historically, we know that citizenship has excluded women, and through the use of the letter novel, writers tap into the history of the letter. So today I will argue that Paulette Ramsey's Aunt Jen provides readers a unique lens through which to consider the broad topic of citizenship in a local, multi-generational context.
The course that I teach with a group of team members is called Documenting Change in the Caribbean from Colonization to Conservation. But in preparing to teach this class, came across the Maroons as a potential sort of field trip, a stop that we could go to take the students to, and we did end up going to Moortown. So I began the secondary research at that point. Coming about 2 years later, I've had a lot more understanding and exposure to the Maroons. So this conference is sort of a dual purpose for me. One is as a major reconnaissance for teaching this class, and also to connect with people who might find this program interesting for their students, so that if they're interested in having their students come and learn more about the Maroons in the Caribbean in general.
I want to just present to you, everybody's been talking about environments, and certainly we know Maroons don't exist outside of the slave environment. And so it's, as everyone has already said, I'm not going to repeat, they're inextricably linked. Very complex relationships are taking place and interactions at various levels. And while that wasn't the initial focus of my research, it was sort of looking at an example of a coffee plantation in Jamaica, looking at something different. But what resulted out of that was a whole lot of many things. Part of that is that relationship between the people at Orangevale as well as those who are at the Charlestown Maroons. Orangevale is one of the larger plantations. It's in the hilly side, as you know, in close proximity to where the old Charlestown Maroons old settlement was. And so there was evidence both orally but also through the documents of those interactions at varying levels.
Did you find any evidence of any kind of musical instrument?
No, not that I am aware of for the musical instruments, no. We found sort of coagulated metal pieces that we were not able to identify what those were. And no, I've been looking because we know we're in the hills, but we did not find anything related to that time.
This is actually my second time taking this hike, but I knew I had to come back because it's such a rare opportunity to actually get to come up on the lands that the Maroons were operating their war, and their survival in the 17th and 18th century.
It was an old coffee plantation back then, where them slaves, the Maroons, have them to do like this and hospital and other things. Just so them live comfortable house and all of them.
I'm going to introduce our first panel of the day. It's entitled Hemispheric Maroons. Our first speaker comes to us from Syracuse University, where he's a PhD candidate. His name is Thor Ritz, and the title of his talk today is Geographies of Maroonage in the French Caribbean. Here's Thor.
I want to suggest that Maroons themselves were, in their practices of flight and revolt, actually engaged in what geographers call the production of a space which was patently anti-state in character. I want to suggest that as the Baharuco Maroons inhabited the southern mountains of Hispaniola, not only did they defy the spatial disciplines of French and Spanish territorial sovereignty, but they were actually enacting an alternative mode of territoriality that demands to be understood, studied, and thought about on its own terms.
The United States Maroon history demonstrates a powerful and irrefutable account of fierce African American resistance, independence, and historical agency. It is fundamental to the history of United States slavery since it broadens contemporary understanding of North American slave resistance beyond the covert or criminalized and begins to restore the neglected histories of successful Maroon communities within the United States.
In most Maroon communities, the treaties are today still considered, of course, valid, right? They never having been any subsequent mutual renegotiation of those treaties. And so the question has often arisen, what is the status of those treaties in the 21st century today? Now, there are several arguments which we could look at, which would argue that they are no longer valid. Certainly in the context of Jamaica, the Jamaican Parliament sought to pass laws that would undermine the treaties that were signed, both here with the Windward Maroons on the eastern part of Jamaica, as well as the Leeward Maroons in the western part of the island. The subsequent conduct, of course, also by government agents also sought to communicate that the treaties were no longer to be upheld.
I believe that the convention which recognizes the rights of individuals recognize also that the areas in which people are accustomed to operate, that they have an interest in those areas. And I want us to be clear on that issue. Because quite apart from territory which is defined as Maroon territory, we have been accustomed to do it, well, Mrs. Carroll mentioned the certain town. But really when you take our area, the whole Luan Janko Mountain Park,
yes,
this in fact is part of what Maroons have been using traditionally for gathering herbs, for hunting, and all the other customs which are part of our heritage. And therefore our right to oversee what happens in those areas must always be maintained.
Maroon communities developed in several areas across Jamaica. The existing communities are depicted on the map, so if you squint, I'm pretty sure you can see them. My focus was on the Accompong Town Maroons, okay, so those located in the west. With this project, I've attempted to characterize the genetic, maternal, lineages in order to explore the genetic ancestry of this community. So to take a different perspective on the oral histories as to how these communities originated. Basically, genetic ancestry is the use of DNA to identify or learn more about an individual or maybe even a population's origins. So underlying this idea of genetic ancestry is that groups of people that are closely related will share particular genetic markers. Okay? So if we look for shared genetic markers, we can then infer that when we find it, those individuals share ancestors and they share an origin.
Thank you all for having me here, and greetings. And in my Maroon language, I would say, Audio Maroon Women and Education. Maroon women in Suriname, I used to think that they were like sheep to their husbands and to their men. But at some point, someone made me aware that they were the boss in society, in their family, and everything. Maroon women nowadays became aware of what education can be. Right now, we have over 100 Maroon young women that are scientists. They graduate. Some of them are lawyers. Some of them are sociologists, economists, name it. A lot of them, some are teaching, lecturing at a university, and two of them became cabinet ministers. Right now, one is the Minister of Social Affairs, and I happen to be the first Maroon ever to be appointed ambassador for the country of Suriname.
It is full time that Maroon, especially Maroon women, be included in decision making, in educational system, economically, controlling trade and marketing of our goods and the goods of our people in our villages, spiritual and moral status, food production and penal justice system, not just as justice of the peace, but as counselors nationally and internationally.
We'd like to bring the sort of scholarly and intellectual component of the 4th International Maroon Conference to a close by featuring the work of a couple of exhilarating writers whose writing intersects in instructive and interesting ways with Jamaica and Maroon cultures.
Something about Nanny captures our imagination. We hold on to every thread of her being that we can recover. We need her to manifest. We will not let her go. For many, she occupies a space of both history and myth, reality and legend, earth and spirit. The historical documents and the oral histories have left us only a certain set of details about Queen Nanny. But in our thirst for her, we fill in the gaps through our fiction and poetry, our imagination.
The poet said there are those to whom place is unimportant, but this place, where sea and fresh water meet, is important. This is Charlestown, and a mile from here is Buff Bay, where my grandfather, my father's father for whom I am named, was born in 1885. The family story is that his brother had hired out to United Fruit and that my grandfather went down to the dock to see him off and never returned. My family, the Giscombe, was native to the settlement. Jamaica was incoherent, miscegenated, heterogeneous, contradictory, continually shifting. Some of us were slaves, some of us were slave owners, some of us were free women of color. Many of us were baptized. We were, as I read us, pragmatic. We became native to the settlement, however uneasy the settlement was. We were not Maroons, for the greatest part, but we became the vernacular, as I read us.
special night. You will find a lot of reflection, you'll find comedy, you'll find drama. But the greater significance of tonight's event is that A Quantum Journey is not just a documentary for public showing, it's a piece of work that should be exposed to the entire Jamaican diaspora.
In a great Ashanti and Maroon tradition, I'd like to present you in a plastic white round. Secondly, I'd like to present to you, this is a signed frame poster of A Quantum Journey, the official poster of our film. And Colonel Winston, I would love for you to accept it on behalf of the Charlestown Maroon Council.
Thank you. I will accept it on behalf of all Maroons, because the journey of all Maroons.
All right.
I'm elated. I'm excited. I couldn't ask for a better night. You know, under the stars in the Maroon community of Charlestown. It's about respect. It's about bringing the film to where it should be. The main thing that I wanted to achieve from this documentary was just it's an educational element. You know, I wanted people to learn, or to know more about these great folks, the Maroons, and especially what they were able to achieve. Being the first successful freedom fighters on this side of the world.
I thought it was very educational. For people that don't know much about the Maroons, you get to learn a lot from this film.
This, as you have experienced, is a conference and festival rolled in one. So the first 2 days of it is featuring researchers from all over the world who have researched various aspects of Maroon art. It's the 4th year of the celebration, and it culminates on Quao Day, the day that Quao signed the second peace treaty with the British. The event is centered around Asafu Yard. Asafu Yard is where the Maroons came to prepare for battle and also to prepare for various forms of celebration, but most famously known for their preparation for battle.
Was in fact a military leader who was a guerrilla strategist who in fact led the Maroons in a victory over the British in their defense, in defending their freedom in the 18th century. That led to the treaty signed in 1739. And so we have this place here, which is sort of like a hideout. It is believed that during the war, Nani and her lieutenants, Quao and friends, used to come here and hide out, a sort of a perfect hiding spot. You see, and that high mountain there, you see, that helped them to be able to sort of secure themselves. Because if they look out, they could stay up there and look and see where the British or who were coming.
Yanking Pong, bless our smarty prayer. Champong Nani, come Sikkim Bebwa. to point out Ambassador from Suriname to Trinidad, Adele Grand Gallo, Susan Robeson, the granddaughter of the great Paul Robertson, great for his exquisite baritone and for his unflinching resistance to oppression, which is why the Nani Abeng Award is presented to him, because these express particular Maroon values.
I know that all the colonels before me welcome you to this, another of our annual Qualms Day celebration. It is important to us as a people to at least once per year remind ourselves of the great deeds that our foreparents have done for us, so that today we can stand in a place like Charlestown and to proudly proclaim to the rest of the world that our foreparents had stood up against colonialism.
The award is a functioning award. It is actually my Abeng, and it's only Abeng that is fitting for this occasion.
am so moved. I was just overwhelmed. Actually, the tears started coming that the colonel would offer his own Abeng as the award to recognize my grandfather, as the Charlestown Maroon Council put it, for his unflinching resistance to oppression, being very much the spirit of the Maroons. And so, of course, this represents the call. So I think just there's such a kinship, I think, between the spirit and the essence of the Maroons in Jamaica and the Charlestown Maroons and my grandfather and what he stood for and what he represented as someone that for whom personal success meant nothing or meant little, that if his people were suffering or people anywhere in the world were suffering, that was more important.
I'm a writer, and I draw a lot of inspiration from words and teachings of our elders. And one of the greatest gifts that the African continent has given me personally is her proverbs. And this particular one is one of my favorites. It says, "Until lions have historians, hunters will be heroes."
It's a genuine honor for my wife, Bonnie Bratt, and I to be here to represent Pamela Bridgewater, the U.S. Ambassador to Jamaica. Ambassador Bridgewater is in fact in the audience. I hope you have a chance to see her. I extend warm greetings on behalf of the U.S. Mission and pass along congratulations to the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. government on this occasion of the 4th Annual Maroon Conference. Alongside many U.S. academics in the audience and private U.S. donors, the government of the United States of America has supported research of the rich and important history of the Maroon communities over the years. We are proud to have partnered with the Maroons to explore sustainable development plans and to help preserve the Maroons' rich history, traditions, and culture. It is therefore an honor and privilege to be here taking part in the important event and reaffirm U.S. Embassy commitment to the Maroons. The people of the United States and the U.S. Embassy in Kingston will remain loyal friends and supporters of Charlestown, as well as all of the embassy, all of the Maroon communities throughout Jamaica.
To congratulate Frank Lumsden on keeping this thing alive. It's been a long, hard struggle for him, getting people involved, getting people to be aware of it. And I'm glad UTEC is here, because that's very important as young people. The Maroons are very important in our history. We owe them a lot. And so I'm happy to be here. This particular event is a very, very interesting event, because it has a lot of scholarship. It's a conference. I'd love to see University of the West Indies more involved. The UTech more involved. I'd like to see NCU more involved. All the tertiary institutions. And I don't care if they are going to tell me they close up and students are gone home. We need to see things in this country as important enough to bring our students and our faculty to things like these. I always say, if Jamaican children knew more about themselves and knew more about the history of their country, they'd be proud.
Well, the Ready funds, which are provided by the World Bank through the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, seeks to stimulate and support micro and small economic activities in agriculture and community-based tourism. The Charlestown Maroon Council applied to us in 2010, and during that time we have worked with them to actually arrive at this day. The grant is for $17 million approximately. And what we have done between 2010 to now is that we've actually worked with the community group, provided them with organizational strengthening training. We have developed with the group as well a business plan, and we actually hired a consultant to be able to formulate the rehabilitation works with the council.
Without the Maroon culture, Charleston you would not know that Charleston exists. When I started this work down here, I told Charleston, the entire Charleston, to prepare for the buses that are going to be coming here. Make puddings, run down, do something different, make drums. We have developed, because of a certain pattern, we have certain visions, certain goals, certain aims, and projects, the implementation of projects is also very important, more so than the project.
Brazilian martial art /dance/movement that is practiced all over the world. It was founded by Brazilian slaves as a resistance movement and is now practiced in modern day by everybody. We have a relationship with the Charlestown Maroons. Capoeira and the Maroons have a lot in common in terms of history. As I mentioned, Capoeira was founded by Brazilian slaves or Maroons, runaway slaves, and it was practiced as a defense mechanism. So the reason why it looks like a dance is because it had to be masked, creatively masked by acrobatic movements, dance movements, drums, music. All the instruments that you would have seen in the show are used to mask what is actually a very potentially lethal martial art.
We need rituals now more than ever. This is what is going to anchor us. This is going to bring us back to ourselves, these rituals, as we are being bombarded by influences from other worlds.
What we do here in Charleston is that we take care of the young. We use a Sankofa bird signal or symbol as a part of direction to us. So we use it to direct our path, like from the past to the future. So we take from our foreparent time, keep it for today to help the younger generation to come.
It was really and truly exciting for me because what it showed is that we're building a platform to really achieve some good things.
On the behalf of the Charlestown Maroon Museum, I would like to say Madasi. Thank you very much for supporting us, and we did enjoy you people coming out here to enjoy what we have to offer of our culture. And I hope next year you will be here too and bring a friend. So, here you are, tell Hada that Tada one has something. So, tell somebody, come out here next year. Thank you very much, Madasi.
Freedom is never freedom when it's freedom from. The only freedom is freedom to. Freedom to accept your responsibilities, man. That's the only expression of